Star Trek made Enterprise's topple the new Dax, but her story may never be finished. When Star Trek Enterprise debuted in 2001, it introduced audiences to Sub-Commander Topple, the first Vulcan officer to serve aboard a human starship. Played by Jolene Blalock, Topple was meant to embody Vulcan logic and restraint while also navigating the cultural and emotional messiness of humans. But as Enterprise evolved, T-Pole's story began to parallel another famous Star Trek legacy character, Deep Space Nine's Jadzia Dax. In many ways, the writers positioned Topple as a new kind of Dax, bridging tradition, science, and philosophy with a deeply personal emotional journey. The tragedy is that her story may never be fully resolved, leaving one of Star Trek's most fascinating character arcs unfinished. T-Pole's role as a cultural bridge. On the surface, Topple and Jadzia Dax come from very different places. Dax is a joined trio, carrying centuries of lifetimes worth of memories, while Topple is a Vulcan raised in a rigid society that prizes discipline over individuality. Yet both women were designed to embody cultural duality. Like Dax, Topple often functioned as the crew's philosophical anchor, providing perspective that no human character could. When Captain Archer bristled against Vulcan meddling, Topple was caught between loyalty to her people and loyalty to her new human colleagues. Similarly, Dax frequently mediated between Starfleet pragmatism and the spiritual traditions of Bajor, or between Federation policy and Klingon honor. Both characters were bridges, translating one worldview into another. The Jadzia parallels. What made Jadzia Dax unique was her balance of wisdom and playfulness. Despite carrying centuries of experience, she was approachable, witty, and willing to bend the rules. Over time, Topple began to mirror these traits. Initially portrayed as rigid and aloof, she gradually loosened, picking up human habits and humor. Episodes like Carbon Creek, where she reveals Vulcan secretly visited Earth in the 1950s, showed a sly, playful side that surprised her crewmates. The parallels deepened in the way both characters carried inner struggles. Jadzia was sometimes torn between her personal desires and the expectations of the Dax symbiote. Topple, meanwhile, wrestled with her conflicted feelings about emotion and logic, exacerbated by her exposure to Trillium-D and her complicated relationship with Trip Tucker. In both cases, Star Trek used these women to explore the tension between identity, culture, and personal choice. A legacy of relationships. Another hallmark of the Dax character was her relationships. Jadzia's marriage to Worf was a groundbreaking arc that merged Klingon traditions with Federation ideals. Similarly, T-Pole's romance with Trip became Enterprise's emotional backbone. It was a relationship born not out of duty, but of genuine vulnerability, giving audiences a rare look at the softening of Vulcan reserve. Much like Jadzia and Worf, Topple and Trip were an odd pairing that deepened both characters. Trip became more reflective and empathetic, while T-Pole's walls began to break down. And just as Jadzia's love story ended in tragedy with her sudden death, T-Pole's romance with Trip ended with heartbreak in Enterprise's controversial finale, where Trip sacrifices himself and Topple is left behind. The unfinished story. This is where the frustration comes in. Jadzia Dax's story was cut short in Deep Space Nine's sixth season due to real-world contract disputes, leaving her arc incomplete. Enterprise repeated history with Topple. The series' cancellation after just 4 seasons meant many of her storylines never reached their full potential. The fallout of her addiction to Trillium-D was barely explored beyond surface-level consequences. Her emotional development and evolving identity as someone caught between Vulcan and human worlds remained unresolved. And her relationship with Trip was robbed of a proper conclusion, with the finale hastily rewriting their arc into tragedy. Had Enterprise continued, Topple could have become one of Star Trek's most transformative characters. She might have been the bridge that fully cemented Vulcan-human cooperation, a living embodiment of the Federation's ideals before its official founding. Instead, like Jadzia, she became another casualty of unfinished storytelling. The legacy of the new Dax. Calling Topple the new Dax isn't to say she replaced the Trill character, but rather that she carried forward the narrative function Dax served, blending ancient wisdom with personal struggle, and embodying the philosophical crossroads of Star Trek. Unfortunately, both women became symbols of what happens when compelling characters are prematurely written off or left unresolved. What remains powerful, though, is the legacy they leave behind. Fans still debate T-Pole's choices, her relationship with Trip, and her role in human history. Much like Dax, she remains a character who lingers,